Nigel, thank you very much indeed for offering to come onto this podcast. I'm going to do my version of an introduction, but I'd be really interested in also your version of an introduction. Mine would be that you taught me and many others data protection, both on the practitioner course, but also on the DPO course. And I've subsequently been a follower and learner from you. But as a follower on various social media platforms, I see all the other work that you do. You were a volunteer for the NHS during the COVID crisis. You've done a lot of study, sort of legal study, I suppose, to support your data protection work. And I understand, which we'll unpack a little later, you're looking now to sort of move on to your PhD. And it's a really interesting blend of somebody who strikes me as being deeply human, deeply empathetic, and at the same time, very task focused, very analytical, very mentally capable. And I think that's a really interesting mix. Who are you?
That's a great question. Who am I? Well, my name is Nigel Gooding. I always call myself a professional West Countryman because I'm very proud of coming from Devon and with Cornish heritage as well. I grew up in Exeter and to a very working class family. My father was a railwayman. My mother worked in a bakery, and as a result of that, I think I was well grounded. I went to university and survived a year. I drank too much, and most of them had a good time. Didn't really study and get on with it, and came back and joined my father on the railway. Funny enough, and then after 13 years, when privatization appeared, I saw an opportunity. I was very lucky. I had a mentor. I had a guy called Steve Kenny. He was a retired guy from BT. Him and his wife sort of took me under their wing and looked after me and drove me, I think, to working for myself. And I took the last of the British Rail severance pay that was on offer because of privatization, and then went up to work for various organizations as an interim. And Tim, I worked as an interim for, oh, let me see, nearly 15, 16 years. And I had some great jobs. I had jobs that I would never get as a
Mhm.
permanent employee, and I could play at the top table, not only of UK government, but also health and local authorities and private sector companies. And about 2017, I saw the opportunities because I was dealing with physical security and also technology security in my previous roles, and also digital business change, particularly in healthcare sector, and particularly in Dorset, who I always speak lovingly about because they're great people. And I realized there was an opportunity with the introduction of GDPR, that the highlighting of data protection, all the things that I knew that I had to operationalize: security, data protection, information rights, freedom of information, environmental information rights, could be an opportunity for me. So I set myself up a company, Data Privacy Advisory Service. There was me, that was it. And then I went to work with organizations as an interim. And then I thought, well, there's a bigger opportunity here. So Mel Garnett joined me as my sort of back office support. And from that, Tim, it's now developed, blossomed into 23 staff we have now, Tim.
Wow.
We had another starter on. And as a result of that, Mel is now the chief executive, and I'm the sort of stand back chair and we deliver consultancy services. We deliver data protection, freedom of information, information rights training, AI training, and we also deliver data strategy piece. If I'm really honest, Tim, I don't do much work these days in terms of frontline consultancy work, but I do enjoy developing new things, getting them up and running, them handing over the team to develop. So that's my professional career.
Mhm.
In my private life, I'm very active in sports. I love my rugby. I'm a rugby referee. I've been referee for 15 years, but before that, funny enough, I was a football referee. I'd
Oh,
managed to scale 5 decades as either a football referee or as a rugby referee. And I have two grown-up children, one of which is Will, who works in Bristol and can speak fluent in German and Japanese, and Ellen, my daughter, who's just about to qualify at Cardiff University as a mental health nurse. So in essence, that's me. I'm based in Exeter, and yeah, I'm still trying to enjoy life at 60, Tim. But I'm also trying to step back a bit at 60 because I've worked for 41 years now, so I'm trying to step back, but I think my brain is always working. My brain is always working, Tim.
It strikes me that you're not really a person, you're an entire community wrapped up in one body. And I have to pick up on your compliment to the people of Dorset, which isn't often forthcoming from people from Cornwall. I'm fully aware of the rivalry, and I won't even dare ask you how a cream tea should be done because I know that that would provoke huge amounts of debate.
It just needs to be eaten, Tim. That's it. Eat any way you like. I most probably eat the cream before the scone,
So I'm really interested in, let's pick up on the AI bit. I mean, there are all sorts of different areas that we can go in. I personally see AI as an accelerant. And I think if you're going in the right direction, AI can help you go in the right direction faster. I think if you're going in the wrong direction, AI would deliver you into a place you don't want to be much quicker. But I would say that I am an enthusiastic learner. I'm certainly not an expert. I haven't studied it, for example, to the depth that you have. And I'm really interested in your view on AI, both as a person who's deeply involved in data, but also somebody who's very involved in people, in lives, in the essence of humanity. What are your views?
Yeah, Tim, I see it as an opportunity, and you must remember that for those people listening, that I run a small to medium enterprise. I run a business,
Mhm.
so I'm looking at the opportunity from DPAS. Clearly, it's a growing market here. So what can we do from that? But on a personal level, I see AI as an opportunity. It's a general purpose tool. It's a bit like the steam engine. It's the fourth industrial revolution. The steam engine started first and revolutionized the way that we do business. And I think that it's a general purpose tool to enable things to develop and us to develop good products, good developments, good machinery, and good learning and good knowledge. But AI in the wrong hands is the same as chemistry in the wrong hands. There are chemists around the world currently who are developing vaccines, who are developing good drugs, who are developing good science to further the cause of mankind in doing good. But there are chemists in the world at the moment who are developing weapons of mass destruction. They're, mustard gas and sarin and all these things. There are chemists working for states around the world doing that. The same in nuclear power. There are people who are developing nuclear power fission on the basis of to produce generate electricity, and there are people on the other side who are doing it to produce weapons. So whatever accelerant you have, there are good and bad within that. And I come from a slightly different angle than most of our data protection colleagues here, because I see it as an opportunity to leverage business goals at a quicker, faster, cheaper, more targeted opportunity. So with my business head on, and that's the important thing. With my business head on, I see it nothing but benefits as such. Of course, there needs to be regulation, but GDPR actually provides a very good foundation for a regulation. The EU AI Act provides a very good foundation for regulation already. So I see it as a positive benefit. I see it as an opportunity which has been around, as we both know, for years. We open our phones up every single day, and AI opens either our thumbprint or our face picture. We see it every single day. So I see it as an opportunity. I think we should embrace it, and we should definitely regulate it. However, I don't think we should be absolutely scared of it. And let me give you one example. The ability of now clinicians to look at MRI scans because of supervised machine learning has gone through a process of identifying what bad MRI scans in terms of cancer diagnosis looks like. In 2005, Tim, I had a radical neck dissection. I had X-rays, MRI scans, and it was just purely down to a doctor. Now, my doctor now in the modern world would have an MRI scan. There would be a prompt. It's only probability, by the way, remember. AI is only a probability. It's saying that could be, is a prompt to the doctor. And it's producing now results which are accurate to the ability of the human being. So they're on a par with each other in terms of it. ultimately, Tim, for me, the human being needs to make decisions at the end, and the human needs to be in the chain all the time. But you and I are not fallible, Tim, are we?
Mm.
We make mistakes all the time. The number of business mistakes I've made, to get myself here, are on, I could count on two hands, let alone one hand. So as long as we understand that it gives a probability, two, it's mathematics, and three, there needs to be human intervention, and four, there needs to be a regulatory framework, then I'm all in favour of it, Tim.
I have to say, I think I agree. I think the metaphor that I might use is traffic lights. I think we would all agree that traffic lights, can reduce, hopefully eliminate road traffic accidents. But I'm fascinated by those people who just literally wait for the bleep and looking at their phone will cross the road in total confidence that the traffic lights are correct and everybody else has obeyed them. And I think you've touched on it there that we recognize probability. It's not absolutes. And I think there's a real danger if we switch off our critical thinking. If we use AI as a tool, as a servant, but we maintain that critical thinking, I think we're okay.
Yeah.
But if we switch off that critical thinking and say everything it gives me is implicitly right, I think therein may be a problem.
Yeah, and Tim, AI is in our everyday life. You turn you turn on your TV at the moment, and Netflix will use reinforcement
Mm.
learning to give you prompts of what they believe that you might want to watch based upon what you previously watched. That's a simple explanation of good AI, because actually, otherwise, Tim, what I normally do is ring my daughter, who never answers the phone anyway. I said, Ellen, what do you recommend that we should be watching this week? Sort of thing. What should I be watching? So and the other thing is, the good example I always give when I'm running the AI courses, Tim, is Merlin ID.
Mm.
Merlin ID is an app developed by Cornell University, and it's the ability to record a bird song whilst you're out for a walk, or the ability to take a picture of a bird and upload it. It's a bit like the ones that you can do with plants. You can take a
Mm.
picture of a plant and upload it. It'll tell you what it thinks it may be. And Merlin ID does that. I know some songs. I know, I clearly know a blackbird. I clearly know a robin. I know a great tip. Teacher, teacher, teacher is the whistle. So I know that. I know a wood pigeon. I know a woodpecker. I know what it's up to. But when it comes to some birds, I really struggle, and particularly this time of year when all the migratory birds are coming back to the UK. It's great because you can walk down the country lane, you can record it, and it will give you a probability. Now, in the old days, Tim, I would have had to go home.
Mhm.
I would have had to look in a book and have a look at and see what I would try to remember what the song was, and it would take me a tremendous amount of time. But I can get instant knowledge on the walk about what that bird is. And for an example, if it's a chiff chaff or something like that, I think fantastic. That's absolutely great. I've not heard that. Next time, I then get recognition as a chiff chaff because Merlin ID told me it's probably going to be a chiff chaff sort of thing. So simple things that AI can give us, I think, enrich and enhance our lives, but also take away menial tasks.
Mm.
As and that's about trying to go online and listen to 400 birds and trying to identify the right one.
Mhm. And I'm interested by that because it kind of touches you and the outdoors, you and nature, and clearly we can't ignore you and the referee on the football pitch and the rugby. And I recollect a quote, and you may well be able to attribute it, but rugby is a thug's game played by gentlemen. Football is a gentleman's game played by thugs. Is somebody's quote from somewhere. What are your experiences as a referee, and how important is it to be out there on the field?
I think you have to look at my motivations. So look at my
Mhm.
motivations. So when I started football refereeing, I was in the Air Training Corps,
Mhm.
and I was doing the Go Duke of Edinburgh Award, and I was 16, and I
Mhm.
was looking for. So you have to do, as you most probably know, four sections of the Go Duke of Edinburgh: an expedition, you have to do public service, you have to do an interest, and I can't remember the last one. Physical education is the last one at the time. And I was looking for an interest, and I was interested in sport. I was captain of the school cricket team. I was in the school rugby team. I wasn't particularly very good at football, but
Mhm.
I'd give it a go. Anyway, and at the time we were very lucky that we had at school we had a one of the boys in my class. His father was a football league linesman at the top level, Tony Ellis, and my school teacher, PE teacher, was very keen on football. So he put me in touch with him, and I thought, well, I'd use that as my interest. Football refereeing is what the interest that I could do. And then, Tim, it was purely for commercial reasons that once I then started refereeing, I was getting £2.50 a game, and this was in 1980. This is 1980. So then I would do a game in the morning at £2. Then I'd do a game in the afternoon, £2.50. I'd have £4.50. Then I'd do a game on Sunday. And all of a sudden, as a student, as a 16-year-old student, I got a tenner in my pocket. And I thought this is a great idea, you know. So my football career really developed on the basis of that whilst I was a student, it was a great commercial activity, and I quite enjoyed it. And as I grew older, as my children arrived, then the game changed. The game became quite abusive in football, but also the travelling away. I was at a senior level. I remember, you know, I remember being the greatest game I had was Portsmouth versus Nottingham Forest in the Brian Clough days in the 1992 FA Cup quarter final at Portsmouth in front of 25,000 people. My only one appearance on Match of the Day. I wasn't refereeing, but I was fourth official. But I remember that day. And once I got to those lofty levels, I felt that, and that with my children growing up in the travelling, I just thought I couldn't do it, so I gave up. And then when Will, my son, started playing rugby at age 10, when they realised they didn't have referees, well, who should step forward but myself? So I did the course, and of course now I do it for fitness, and that's the reason. I do it. I also might sound strange, Tim, but I also do it to keep in contact with men and women of sport, because that to me is a great motivator. It's a great, you know, there's nothing better than getting in my car on a Saturday afternoon when it's a sunny day like today, getting out, driving across mid-Devon and going to Torrington or going to Bideford, driving through the countryside during winter, during spring, during late summer, and seeing the changes in the environment, and you're able to see it. So for me, the motivation now is about keeping fit. It's not about the money because you don't get paid as a rugby referee, you get the mileage. And that will be insignificant anyway. But it's also about interacting with communities, interacting with people in different environments, seeing the growth of clubs, you know, refereeing children's, men's, women's, boys, girls, and interacting with club members, supporters, and also and parents as well. So it gives me a bit of a motivation. And rugby is I wouldn't say it's a gentle game. I refereed last night, and you know, it's certainly not. And I sometimes ouch and think, blimey, you know, that tackle was really hard. Not dangerous, but hard. I couldn't play these days, but certainly from my perspective, it certainly gives me emphasis, and it gives me an escape. It's an escape from reality in terms of life, in terms of business life, and other things. So I quite enjoy it. Still enjoy it. It's more difficult as I get older. You have to do fitness tests. It gets harder every single year. Yeah, I still keep that motivation up.
And I'm interested in that. You touched on it a little bit yourself there when you talked about, you know, football's been through a sort of cultural revolution from, you know, sort of the 80s to the present day. It's quite a different game. And it's had some pretty tough times on the terraces, and then has, I think, now become again a family game, a game that the whole family can go to and enjoy. But famously, there are kind of differences in culture and behaviour between football and rugby. One only has to actually look at the attitude towards the referee. I think there's a huge amount of respect and deference to the referee in rugby that perhaps is not afforded to the role in football. And I'm interested in that. You drew on the point about community and club. And what are your reflections on culture and culture change in those two very different types of environments? Or maybe you don't necessarily see them as being different.
I guess it's role models really. So if, for an example, that you watch a match of the day and you see, you know, you see 10 players surrounding the referee after a decision. You don't see it so much these days, but you certainly did, you know, 5, 6 years ago, because of the introduction of VAR and the ability to check decisions and those sort of things. So you don't see it so much. So it's about really about role models. And I think what people see on the TV and then relate to what happens on a park on a Sunday morning is important. And so I think all our sportsmen and women really have an obligation, I think, to be role models, and whether it be cricket, whether it be tennis, whether it be football. Cricket, if you look at cricket, Tim, you and I have the era of Dennis Lillee and Ian Botham and Ian Chappell, having punch-ups on the pitch, those sort of things don't really happen anymore, predominantly because of the administrators have got hold of the game and able to put in place safeguards, but also sanctions as well. So I think that when you look at the parity between the two games, there is I think football's moving towards rugby. Rugby's not without its problems, by the way. You may have seen 2 days ago that a guy in New Zealand was fined for abusing online an international rugby referee during the Rugby World Cup. And it's certainly there are issues within rugby, particularly around spectator behaviour towards referees, and particularly and their own challenges. And the important thing is that administrators need to be able to keep on top of these and support those people who are fishing, because ultimately, if you don't have a referee, you'll have no game, and so that's vitally important. But the great thing that I'm seeing from both football and also rugby, Tim, is the diversity in the game, and that's great. It's not just a blokes game. It is a boys, girls, man, and women's game, which is absolutely fantastic. And actually seeing that, and I think that gives how can I describe it, a more balanced view going forward of respect and how you behave. One of the funny stories I always told him many years ago, I was up in a place called Ogmore Vale, which is one of the Welsh valleys, and the local derby, I think Nanty Moyle were playing Ogmore Vale. And I always remember it was a rugby game, Boxing Day game, a bit of a beer game as such. It was all sort of set up, an annual game that would take place. And within the first 2 minutes, the scrum came up and the two front rows were fighting. And the referee, who was an older gentleman, blew his whistle and got the two front rows together and say, "Boys," I'm not going to do the accent, but "Boys, any more of that, and I'll be talking to your mothers after the game." Of which all the players looked at it and said, "Sorry, sir, really sorry, really sorry, really sorry." And he pointed to their mothers on the touchline. I thought, what a great response. So so that's that was a classic response, and most probably reflects rugby rather than football, I think. Yeah.
And I'm interested, you make the point about role models, and I wholly agree. But I'm going to tie that back to something you said right at the beginning, at the introduction. You touched on, in your early days as an interim, you also had a mentor. And I'm interested in how profound that was, how they were as a role model for you, and how being an interim, allowed you to see different role models.
Yeah. So the guy who was my role model was a guy called Steve Kenny. Steve, I was working for the National Rail Inquiry Service. We were trying to go from 43 call centres down to 5 geographical regions. We had 79 different numbers, and we had 19 different rail operators owning it. And we were trying to go down to a single national number. This is 1995, 97, part of rail privatisation. And I was the scheme manager. I was responsible for it, and we brought in a guy called Steve Kenny. Now, Steve was on 500 quid a day then in 1997. That was a big amount, but Steve was a big guy, and I mean a big guy always. He was South London. He was down from Norwood, and he had this wonderful accent. And him and his wife Eunice became very good friends of mine. And Steve was retired from BT and had a very good way about him. And when I first met him, his exact words were, "Gooding, my role here is to keep you out of trouble." And that was his first words for that. And we then recruited two other guys who remain laners because they're still living, but two other guys into the scheme, and we all became Steve Kenny fans. Now, Steve, to me, one of Steve's great phrases, "Gooding, you're pushing against an open door." I use that so often now. When I reflect back on Steve. So and Steve became very, very useful in terms of just simple things as a leader being
Mm.
able to say, don't send that out, let me check it. And I said, Steve, are you checking my work? Yeah, because I don't want you to get into trouble. And realizing that he's actually got your back. He's actually got your back. He's senior, he's been around, he was in BT, he's done this sort of thing before, he knows what he's doing, he can do the stakeholder management, and he can actually manage upwards, which is really important. At the time, we had a chief executive who wasn't rail background, who wasn't call center background, who wasn't digital background, who didn't quite get it. And Steve was a great upward manager. And I learned so much from Steve from
Mm.
that. And I always remember one day that I went in, he said, "Oh, you live in Devon, Gooding, don't you?" So 2 days a week I would commute up to London. Yeah, yes, I do, Steve. Get me the local newspaper. So I got in the local property newspaper. So I got the local property newspaper. Within 6 months, him and Eunice had sold up and were living in Crediton, just outside Exeter. They'd moved on the basis of that. So I actually knew him locally as well. And I always remember that I was stood in a cafe in Crediton one day, and all of a sudden he said, "I recognise that back of the head." And I said, "I recognise that South London accent, Kenny. How you doing?" Sort of thing. And so it does actually, Tim, bring a little tear to my eye when I think about Steve, because I don't think I would be here now if it wasn't for Steve. And he had such a great way about him, and he had some great satirical stories about him because he was a big guy. He would tell stories about about how many people they needed when he was on holiday to balance people up on an elephant. How many when he got on a small plane north of Inverness going to Thurso, that he had to sit on the right hand side and four people had to sit on the left hand side. So he would be very self-effacing, and I learned that from him, to become very self-effacing, and be very humble in how you achieve things. So I think mentoring is very important. It's about someone not necessarily adopting you, but a good mentor has your back. Two, they're not scared to tell you when you're wrong. And I think that's about self-reflection and being able to do it. And I think three, it is also very, very supportive. And
Mm.
Tim, we're going through a tricky we're going through tricky situations at the moment at DPAS. We've had, two major emotional events with the team over the last couple of months, and quite frankly, I miss someone. Now I'm at the top. Now I'm at the Steve Kenny role. I actually miss, but I know how important it is for me to support my staff because of what Steve Kenny did for me. And if that's all Steve Kenny's mentoring did for me, then it's a flipping good job that I had and met him. So he's passed away now. I do think dearly of him, and Eunice, his wife, is still living, and I still keep in touch. But yeah, and they no longer live in. She no longer lives in Devon, which is a shame. But yeah, he is a profound effect on the reason why that DPAS is what it is, and how I am what I am.
And I think it's interesting to explore that a little further because one of the things that you touched upon is that you were both working for a CEO who didn't necessarily have the technical skills for the railways, as you put it. And so I'm really interested in your view, because lots of people have different views about how important technical skill is when you are a leader. That balance between technical skill and people skills. And there's a difference between coaching, consulting, and mentoring. And they are really a little bit about that different balances. I mean, what are your views there? Because you at different times have been all of those things.
So I've never held the view that you need to be able to drive a train to be a train to manage train crew. There's
Mm.
an example. You don't need to know, but you do need to know the ins and outs of the challenges of the role, whether it be how one books on, the rostering, how long shifts should be, the safety regulations around it. So you do need to know an element of technical knowledge. In this case, Tim, we were talking about in this case, it was someone from the armed forces. So the leadership skills were honed outside of a business environment. So in essence, they were top-down managers
Mm.
rather than consultative team players as such. So that was a bit of a challenge. So for people at that middle management level, the challenge is understanding about the relationship with your boss and about how you can manage your boss. And that's a really difficult situation. Understanding what your boss wants, understanding what their key drivers are. I'm quite laid back. So for example, in our organization, Mel, who is quite driven, in terms of it, facts, figures, and always on the go. Whereas I'm quite laid back about setting parameters and allowing people to make mistakes, learning from the mistakes, and moving on. So I'm a different manager. So I think that the technical skills are important. You have to have empathy for the individuals on the front line delivering the job. You need to understand those. And what I say about, I think I told you, Tim, at the DPO course, that the key thing about being a DPO is you most probably don't know how HR works. You most probably don't know how finance works. You most probably don't know how operations works. Well, go in and sit with them for a day and understand how they work. You don't need a technical piece of knowledge to understand how they work, but you need to you need to understand from a high level some of the challenges that you actually have in delivering it. And I guess that a good example of that, Tim, was when I worked as an HCA at the Royal Devon Exeter Hospital during healthcare assistant during COVID, and I was a bank member of staff. I worked for 2 days a week, I could choose my shifts, and I predominantly decided to work in A&E because I quite enjoyed the environment as such. Now, to lead an A&E department, you clearly need technical skills to understand how it operates and how it works as such. However, you do not need to be an emergency care consultant to be able to manage, because those two skill sets are completely different. The mistake most people make, by the way, Tim, is promoting the good corporal who's really good on the ground at being able to being either a soldier or in the Navy or in the Air Force and being able to do their job to a leadership position, because the two skill sets are different. The two skill sets are absolutely different in terms of being able to deliver. Leadership skills requires, I believe, people with a empathy, people who have got good grounding in communication, good stakeholder management, both upwards and also downwards, the ability to speak to someone, for example, at a call center, but also the ability to speak to the chair of the company and be able to work with them. And it also requires a great degree of, I think, focus in terms of enabling those people with the skill set, finance, HR, operations, to be able to deliver within a framework that you have set. So therefore, that skill set is about developing a framework, a strategy, a set of objectives of which you can allow them to deliver towards.
I'm interested in exploring that a little further. I think there's this is a very personal view, but I think there's a tendency to praise leadership at the expense of management without necessarily recognizing both have their virtue, both have their value. I think we live in a world where increasingly we try to be at the top of the staircase and marginalize or undervalue those that are halfway up or actually on the essential bottom run, providing the core services to customers. I mean, what is your view on that sort of division of management and leadership, which is really an F.W. Taylor thing from the 1950s? And now, of course, Henry Ford's crew who were illiterate, unable, and had to be effectively spoon-fed the tasks, on language sheets because most of them weren't speaking English. Now our workforce is educated, informed, motivated like no generation ever before. What's the distinction of leadership and management now?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Tim. And look, everyone comes to work for different reasons. So that's the start. If we got Maslow's hierarchy of needs, ultimately we come for pay, don't we? Ultimately, you said to me, why are you still working, Nigel, at 60 after 41 years? Well, I still need the money. I've got to do university and I still need the cash. I'm not cash rich. So that's the first point. And ultimately, the other statement I'll make is actually that it's the middle management, the sergeants, the warrant officers of the armed forces who actually run the business. You don't, they run the army, and without their skill set, you watch any program which is a documentary based upon running a ship and running an Air Force base or running a Marine camp, you'll see that it's the senior NCOs who actually run the operation. And really, the officers really there are to set strategy and be able to provide support to those people who've got the ability. And ultimately, your job as a leader is to upskill,
Mm.
provide support, and also provide the environment. So I was listening to Seb Coe the other day on the Rest is Politics podcast,
Mm.
a really good podcast that I listened to. Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell were interviewing Seb Coe. And Seb Coe, who was at the time the chair of the International Athletics Association, said the reason why he turned that organization around was, one, you recruit good people. Two, you set the parameters of how you want them to deliver. Sorry, of what you want them to deliver, not how. And three, you unleash them and provide them support.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is great leadership. So you provide them with the overarching, you get the right people to, which is not easy in itself, Tim,
Mm.
to get the right people. Two, you provide them with what good looks like in terms of the outcomes you want. And then thirdly, you provide them support, guidance, and that's where your mentoring, coaching, and support come in. That's a job of a leader, not to micromanage. I've worked for some dreadful bosses as an interim and it was quite interesting, Tim, that when I was reflecting back on our email conversation yesterday about some of the questions, when I consider that some of the people I've worked with, one of the reasons why I wanted to set DPAS off, Tim, because in the past, certainly not endorse it, so certainly not endorse it, I will enjoy it. I have worked for some dreadful leaders who are top-down micromanagers who actually made me feel worthless. And it's quite weird because I was going to organizations in my 50s with huge amounts of experience, great gravitas in being able to deliver projects, programs, transformation programs. And I was being micromanaged by someone who was clearly had how one described most probably a confidence issue, a trust issue in those people who are delivering the past. Now, that's their chip on their shoulder, not mine. And the
Mm.
great thing as an interim, Tim, is you can most probably step back from it. You can step back. You can step back and say, I'm not getting involved in this politics.
Mm.
This is what I'm going to deliver. And so one of the things that I'm very keen on is get the right people, set the parameters, or if you're, for example, in my interim days, I would write my 90-day plan and say,
Mm.
this is what I'm delivering. Do you agree? And then I would say to them, let me deliver it. If not, it's pointless being here.
Well, let's move on a little with that 90-day plan. I mean, one of the things that we touched on a little earlier is that you're interested in a sustainability business opportunity in Cornwall. Tell me a little bit about that and maybe what might go into a 90 or 100-day plan were you to do something like that.
Cool. Yeah. So the background, Tim, is that I did say after my master's degree, I've got 4 postgraduate certificates and a master's degree, which I managed to acquire in the last 5 years. So bearing in mind that I didn't get a first degree and then I managed to get back to education and really enjoyed it and really enjoyed research. And I said I would never, a bit like a Steve Redgrave, if I get into a boat
Mm.
again after his 4th gold medal, please shoot me. And a bit like after the Masters, if I get into academia again, please shoot me. But no, I saw an opportunity with Falmouth University. I've got a postgraduate certificate in higher education, a university lecturer's teaching certificate from them last year. I really enjoyed the environment. And Cornwall has an area of outstanding natural beauty. It's now called Cornwall Natural Landscapes, but within Cornwall, there are 12 geographical areas which are defined as part of this landscape. So there's not one.
Mm.
There are 12 landscapes, all of which have different stakeholders involvement, different town councils, different landowners, different business models, different scale in terms of some of the landscape that they have. And the project really is the research project that I'm pitching to Falmouth University is to review the 5-year business plan that the Cornish Natural Landscapes have put together with a view to, one, producing a really good piece of research that can be used throughout the world in
Mhm.
assessing whether business can be sustainable in that landscape and sustainable from not only an environmental prospect, but a business that lasts more than five years, or for example, a business that is open more than 6 months, i.e., tourism. And so a critical piece of analysis which will look at those 12 geographical areas and look at the plan and see whether the plan fit for purpose. So it's a benefits realization piece on the plan. So is the plan robust? Does it enable sustainable business in terms of sustainability environmentally, sustainability in terms of long-lasting business? And of course, one of the challenges of Cornwall has, Tim, is that there's a decrease in funding. So the EU and government funding is not there anymore. It has an aging population. It has a predominance of seasonal jobs. It has a challenge of second homes, so therefore affordable housing for local people. It has never really recovered, I think, from heavy industry that was in Cornwall as well. So I'm looking at the plan. So my 90-day plan really. So going back to asking your question, really is that one, establish some really clear guidelines from the stakeholders, which are Cornwall natural landscapes. What does good look like for them? Two, establish what good looks like in terms of the research outcomes for Falmouth University, because they clearly want to use this as a research piece of work of which they can use as a template for future national parks and for future areas of outstanding natural beauty throughout the world, which is great. And three, is understand the other stakeholders. So my first 30 days, I guess, is mapping out what good looks like in terms of that, and then engaging with the stakeholders, the key stakeholders, one of which will be Cornwall County Council, clearly, Cornwall Council and other big landowners in Cornwall, and what good looks like. So that's my 30 days. My 30 to 60 days would then be scoping out timelines and then looking at one, research. So looking at my quantitative research that I'd need to do in terms of two, looking at the skill sets that I need to acquire to do that research better. And three, how can I apply that research to some of the areas? And then I guess in that 30 days as well, Tim, there's about understanding the areas. So going to the 12 areas and seeing what they're like and seeing the difference. You know, I've been to Bodmin Moor before. I know what that's like, but there are certain parts of the natural landscape that I've not been to. So I would get a greater understanding of that. And then in my first 60 days, I would have also understood the capacity and capability of not only the rural landscape, but also Cornwall natural landscape, how to deliver. And then 60 to 90 days is about the delivery and starting to do some of the delivery objectives. So I've got 7 clear objectives already identified. They might go to 8, Tim. They might come down to 6, depending upon the stakeholders' wishes. And what I will then do is map them through in terms of the 90 days. So it's really, really important that you agree at the start of any project or program the objectives and how you then link them back to the project task, and then how you engage the stakeholders on a regular basis to say, are you happy with this? Are you happy with this? So it's classic program management, really. Identify the objectives, identify your key stakeholders, identify your project plan, your timeline, and then also how you're able to check back with stakeholders to deliver. Research projects are very much unlike program management, Tim, because there's no project management board, but you've got your supervisor and you'll have your key stakeholders. So they, in essence, become your program board to be able to set up. And ultimately, it's an exciting task. It will utilize my project and program management. I'll also be a critical friend as well, Tim, because I bring a whole swathe of knowledge of working for local authorities and working in that highly political environment, which it will be, and sensitive environment, and so I'm quite excited about it. I might just finish it in 3 years. So yeah.
I'm interested because it is subtly different with research, but not necessarily so. I agree the importance of objectives, absolutely. But I think my own experience is that organizations are quite poor at translating objectives into key performance measures. And sometimes in a research project, of course, you don't know what are meaningful measures until you've done the research. And so there's a little bit of chicken and egg. You might turn up with some presuppositions of what's important, and after your research, you identify something else is the key thing. What is your experience in terms of the value of measures. To what extent are they dysfunctional tick box exercises, or to what extent are they meaningful measures of performance and achievement?
We all take unconscious bias from every program or project that we do. We take our unconscious bias that we think that because we've done it before somewhere else, that actually it can be the same model. And it's quite interesting, Tim, that I've worked in large organizations which have had the same consultancy company working with them. And when I've opened up the business plan, it looks exactly the same as the previous one I worked with. So I'm not telling you who that is, and I'm not telling you where it is, but it was true. I looked at all you've done is change the name on this. So yeah. So we bring unconscious bias with us, and we bring most probably unconscious bias key performance indicators with us. A lot of the stuff, Tim, is people look for tangibles depending on who you're managing and who you're leading. So who your leader is. So if you look at a board, or if you look at the chief executive, or if you look at the chair, depends whether they're a detailed man or woman, or focused man or woman, or also depends whether they're quite holistic and actually feel a quite hedonistic attitude to outputs, that as long as it looks nice, that's absolutely great. But if you've got, for example, someone who comes from a finance detailed background, a statistical background, they'll want facts, figures, they'll want tangible KPIs. So I think it depends upon the organization's appetite, I think, for KPIs, and also whether they want subjective or objective KPIs as such. But of course, if you're spending other people's money, clearly people want to key performance indicators which are quite objective and you can quite measure as such. So you can measure, we've had 500 interactions with the community this week, thank you very much, tick the box, etc. Because that justifies £2 million of government funding. So you can understand that, behind it, Tim. So I think it's very much up to the organization's appetite for what it needs to deliver and how it needs to. Now, we did a very big piece of data strategy work for a very large global company, 107 countries in the world, 250,000 employees. It was about the data strategy for their employees and develop a compliance, develop a governance, and develop a data value piece on their employee database. And the key that they wanted was, and they were very detailed focused, they have lots of scientists, lots of bright people working for them, but they actually wanted us to define what good looks like. So we tried to define what good looks like for them, but they were really struggling. And what they wanted us to do was bring that third party, that visionary piece to them to develop what the KPIs might look like. And the KPIs for us was about delivering a data strategy on the 31st of March 2020. That was the single KPI that needs to be delivered. And so our job was to, as you're quite rightly so, Tim, is you can't define the KPIs until you've sat down with the stakeholders and define what good looks like for them. That was a classic example of defining KPIs after the research. So yeah, it depends. Some organizations will have a quite clear objective about what they need to achieve. It's always easy with numbers, Tim. So if someone needs to save £5 million, it's always easy with numbers because you can actually identify at the start opportunities and then work with stakeholders to develop what those KPIs look like. But ultimately, the KPI number is we need to save £5 million per annum. It's easy. It's easy. Where it is about what could good look like, what does a good template look like, what are other people doing, what will be future proof for the next 5-10 years. That's the interesting piece for me. I get far more out of those sort of pieces of work, Tim, than actually saying we've got to save £5 million, because most people just top slice the budget and take 10% off every department you've actually got. Whereas those pieces of work where you have to work with stakeholders to develop visionary KPIs are far more interesting.
And what are the Nigel KPIs, either qualitative or quantitative? Yeah, as you look back on your life and as you look forward to what appears to be a never-ending stream of learning, opportunity, and contribution, what are the things that make you think that's really worth doing?
I don't know, Tim. I don't know what drives me underneath. I guess one of the big things that drives me, Tim, is that in 1935, my father passed the 11 plus to go to Heel School, which is the grammar school in Exeter.
Mm-hmm.
But my grandparents couldn't afford to take him.
Mm.
I sent him, they couldn't afford it. in 1898, the 4th of April, 1898, my grandmother was born in St Austell Workhouse because of her mother was 18 and she was sent away to have my grandmother in the workhouse, and she was a lace maker in Honiton, and father unknown, but I now know the father was John Goodman, village blacksmith, deceased. I saw that on her wedding certificate. So what drives me really is I think that if I think of the upbringing that I had, and we struggled a lot from that, I want to try and I suppose I'm a big carer. I want to care for everyone, but then realize that I can't care for everyone. I grew up on a very, very difficult council estate. I was quite bright. So I played sport to a good level. Fortunately, I had a big, tall brother who was 11 years older than me, so that was always quite helpful. He was quite a good threat to those boys that wanted to bully me because of my brightness as such. And so I've always wanted to make sure that those around me are looked after and cared for and protected as such. And that's quite frightening now when you have 23 staff. And yes, I know the difference between family, and I know the difference between their staff and their employees, sort of things. But I don't buy that, by the way. I don't buy that. I buy the fact that everyone's a human being and everyone should be treated with respect and should be looked after without fear or favour. And a good example, Tim, when I worked in A&E, we had prisoners would arrive from local prisons. We would have people who are down on their luck. We had people with mental health difficulties and all those challenges. And those people are equals to me. Why should I judge them in any different way? And so I've always lived my life and going forward as well. But if I can leave a tangible effect on people like Kenny left on me, if I can leave a tangible result in terms of the company is still robust, we're 7 years in now, we're still going 7 years time, we're still going 20 years time, or we've still got some semblance of the company. Those people I've worked with have grown and developed and those sort of things. My children have grown up to healthy, respectful adults, which they are. Then I feel I've achieved everything in life, and I think that when you consider where we've come from, where we've got to, then I can be actually very proud. I'll never stop caring for people. I'll never stop looking after people. It's in my DNA. I struggle, Tim, sometimes with capitalism. The fact is I run a business, and actually that I'm the owner, and I'm the sole shareholder, and I struggle with that concept sometimes. But ultimately, it's what makes business go round. And I think that if I'm very successful and successful in being able to do this PhD project, hopefully I can leave a tangible legacy for Cornwall, because I do go back to my grandmother and my great-grandmother being alone in that workhouse, and it's something I can't explain why I feel an affinity towards them. I only briefly met my grandmother for the first 7, 8 years of her life before she passed away, but there is some affinity there, I think. So if I can leave a tangible legacy, work, people that I touch, and also in the work that I do in terms of being successful in the PhD, then I'll feel happy.
And that's really interesting because I didn't know that, and yet implicitly, that's why I wanted to have this conversation. I could feel that from you. I could see that in you. It's why I knew that this would be a deep, rich, and entertaining as well as interesting conversation. You have something about you that makes that implicit, and it was really interesting to hear you unpack that. So thank you very much indeed. This has been a wonderful conversation. I wish you the best of luck. I will continue following you because you are a very bright person who shares lots of stuff, and I greatly value that. And your intellect and your humanity. I mean, what a great combination. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Tim. Really enjoyed it. And yeah, we'll keep in touch anyway. So I'll be over sometime soon to Jersey and to see you. So and the other folk that I know, and I hope the sun is shining on Jersey now. So last time I was there, it was beautiful. So
It's okay today. No.
for those people who've
It'll
not
get
been,
better. And by the time you'll be here, it'll be wonderful.
for
Okay.
those people who've not been in the Channel Islands, you need to go. It's fantastic.
It is lovely. Absolutely. When the sun's out, the place is amazing. So thank you very much indeed. We will catch up in person, and I commend everybody to sort of watch this podcast. It's really good fun to produce, really good fun to be involved. Nigel Gooding, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Jim.